We might have been introduced to the concept of delayed gratification, sacrificing something today for receiving something greater tomorrow. And if we are involved in some kind of investing, we are probably used to this concept. We buy a share of a company today, and in 1 year's time, that share will probably have increased in value, and we might have received a dividend as well. But what about applying this principle in other areas in life, like learning something new or developing our mind? Chances are that this is more unexplored territory for most people. It is very difficult for most people to think about their own personal development and their own progress, because it is very difficult to imagine yourself in who you can become in a year or 10 years time. We are who we are, right? And we cannot change. This assumption is why I think most people don't develop as much as they could. And Warren Buffett, he has shared that most people actually do not develop to their full potential. I think one of the reasons is that it's very diffuse. It's very difficult to measure personal development. With money, you can measure that. If you made a 6 to 7 to 8% return in a year, you can calculate it and see it. But how can you measure if you became 7 to 10% smarter 1 year? That's much more difficult. One person who really realized this was Charlie Munger, who used to be the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And he used to spend hours every day developing his own mind. He had the thought that every day, if he could spend his most important hours in the morning, 1 or 2 hours, into his own mind and own development, that would have a huge effect in the long run. The rest of the day could be dedicated for meetings and doing work, but the most important hours in the morning, when he was the most fresh in his mind, he dedicated for his own development. So he studied everything from Greek philosophy to how great businesses worked to how founders developed their companies. By doing so, he developed a very unique view of how the world works and operates that he could apply in his investment decisions. He also developed a very unique system of psychology in which he could reduce the amount of mistakes a person makes by having a checklist of different mental sidetracks or mental quirks or mistakes that a person can make. He called this the psychology of human misjudgment. And he's also famous for inverting when it comes to problems. Just like you do in mathematics, you can invert a problem and then it becomes easier to solve. So he would look at the problem and see all the negative outcomes that he wanted to avoid, and in that way he could find better alternatives. I think Charlie Munger is a great example for what a person can become if they develop themselves and read. Because when we start to learn from other smart, intelligent people who have mastered one area, for example, we can avoid making mistakes in that area in our own life, and we can excel much faster than what we would have done if we only saw ourselves as a guinea pig and tried trial and error, which most people do. No, but instead we could see what this successful person did in this field and this acknowledged person, what they did, and by doing so we can reduce our own errors, and that can potentially have a great effect on our own life and when we're trying to master this area. A person who reads could, for example, learn from the mistake that Sir Isaac Newton did. He was very accomplished in one area, and he mistakenly thought that just because he was successful in one area, then he would be successful in other areas like investing as well. So he suffered from overconfidence in his own ability, and he invested all his money and lost most of it. The person who reads could learn from this experience and avoid doing that themselves by either being more diversified, not seeing themselves as an active investor, but more being a passive investor, investing in, for example, passive index funds. Or they could, if they want to be an active investor, only invest in areas where they have great expertise, where they have an advantage over others. A person who reads can also learn that during an investor's lifetime, their holdings will probably drop 50% at 1 or 2 occasions, and they should be fine with that. But the person who has not read that might occur might panic when that happens and sell all their shares and make a huge loss. But the person who reads and someone who has studied Charlie Munger, for example, they can avoid this, and they can instead buy more when there's blood in the streets. They can start to invest more when the market goes down, because that is usually a great opportunity. A person who reads could come in contact with Benjamin Franklin's way of tracking habits. He saw 13 positive virtues that he wanted to develop, and each time that he broke one of these rules, so to speak, he made a cross in his calendar. So he started tracking his own behavior in order to develop personally. This might seem like a small, insignificant thing to do, but we should remember the quote from Warren Buffett: "The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken." So if a person could use this system to break one or two of their bad habits, that could have a huge effect on their quality of life and their result in life. A person who reads could learn to be generous towards the right people and say no to others. So this could also seem like a small, insignificant change, but imagine a person who is generous towards people who take advantage of them, but then they forget to be generous towards their family. So a person who reads could learn to do the opposite, to say no to people who want to take advantage of them and be generous towards the right people, like their family or the right potential partners. Investing in our own mind and reading might seem like a waste of time at first. And to other people, it might seem like we're only resting and we're only lying on the sofa, not doing anything, when we're actually studying and developing ourselves. And sometimes we also might question if this is really a valuable thing to do. Shouldn't we be working really hard, sweating, doing hard physical work, or working hard on projects, delivering services to our clients, etc.? But just as the dandelion develop most of its roots before the actual plant appears and the flower appears, the same process happens to ourselves when we study and when we read. The results might not come until years after, when we avoid selling in a panic, for example. And it might also be that we might avoid things that are not obvious to us in the moment. We might have avoided some bad business relationships that we would have started otherwise, or we might have avoided a bad investment that we would have done otherwise. So can you see, the results might come much later, and they might not be obvious because we cannot see the mistakes that we would have done if we wouldn't have studied this. Chances are also that a person who reads and develops themselves will turn into a different person in a few years. They will start to develop their vocabulary and express themselves in more accurate and precise ways. They might start to dress in a different way, to hold themselves in a different way, because now they have new role models that they look up to. Things like this. Joseph Addison said, "Reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body." If this is true, then reading should make us have better thoughts and improve the quality of our thinking, which should help us to have better results in life. We can also look at reading and developing ourselves as preparing for when the right opportunity presents itself. Most people are totally unprepared for when opportunities present themselves. They don't know what to do with an opportunity. They think that this is something that other people do, this is not for me. So they have no idea and no clue about how to take advantage of this situation. But someone who has studied and learned to identify this type of opportunity might act with much more boldness in this situation. They might see that when the stock market drops 50%, that this is not a time to panic and to never more invest in the stock market. This is actually a great time to start buying, because now everything is on sale. You see, a person who reads could sit and wait years until the right opportunity presents itself. And when it does, they could act with boldness. You see, Warren Buffett, he wrote this in his 2016 letters to shareholders. "Every decade or so, dark clouds fill the economic skies, and they briefly rain gold. When downpours of that sort occur, it's imperative that we rush outdoors carrying wash tubs, not teaspoons." What Warren Buffett meant here is that when the right opportunities present themselves, we need to act with boldness. For example, if there is a sale in the stock market when it has dropped, we should buy more if we can. When there's a recession and most people are closing down and going bankrupt, that might be the right opportunity to take over one of those businesses and expand your own business. And even a person who is investing passively in index funds, they could increase the monthly amount that they invest every month. They could make sure to be able to do that by having extra cash that they can invest. You see, life only gets us a handful of big opportunities. So we need to prepare and be ready for when they arrive. So by reading, studying, and preparing for this opportunity, we could have the higher potential to 1. Recognize the opportunity in the first place. 2. Have the skills or capital to be able to take advantage of it. And 3. Have the courage to grab it and make most of it. If we don't read, we will have no clue about the opportunity if it was there in the first place. But the person who reads will be able to know how to use this opportunity to improve their life dramatically. One example of this is when Warren Buffett was rejected by Harvard, where he wanted to study. Instead, he applied to Columbia University. This was a university where his idol Benjamin Graham used to teach. So Warren Buffett had already read his book, The Intelligent Investor, many times and studied it and learned it. So he soaked up every word, every minute, every second of Benjamin Graham's class. And Warren Buffett, he learned that his teacher, Benjamin Graham, was on the board of the company Geico, an insurance company. So Warren Buffett, he got interested and he took the train to this company and wanted to visit it and see what company this was. So he showed up, he banged on the door, and one janitor let him in. There he met the vice president at the time, Lorimer Davidson, who showed him around, and they had a long chat about how the company worked. And Warren has said later that he learned more about insurance business than in any other meeting or in school. And this was the first time that Warren bought some Geico stock. And later in 1976, when the company faced some problems, Warren saw the opportunity to buy a large portion of this company. And that became one of the first real big investments and real successful investments that he did. And in 1996, he actually bought the rest of the company. So can you see how it started from being interested and learning about the company, going to visit it, and then buying the whole company? Another example of a person who took advantage of an opportunity is the Swedish investor Rune Andersson. And he grew up in a small village called Mörkamåla outside Kyrkhult in south of Sweden. And he grew up on a small farm in humble beginnings. And his family, he remember when they were forced to apply for normal jobs when their small farm wasn't profitable enough to support them. But he always remembered his father's longing, or his father's how much value he put in running his own business. So Rune, he studied to become a business leader. After studying engineering in Chalmers in Gothenburg, he got a position at Electrolux, a Swedish company. There he got the responsibility for Getinge, a company in the medtech sector. And there he learned everything about this company, and it was very profitable and was working great. And he learned the in and outs of it and admired it as a company. Years later, when he was CEO of Trelleborg AB, he heard that Getinge was doing very poorly and was losing money. He could not believe his ears because he thought it was such a wonderful, great company. So he thought that it must be the CEO who doesn't know how to run it. So he and a friend, they discussed the situation and they decided to make an offer to buy the company. So he saw the opportunity that this great company that he used to run was doing really poorly. They could buy it for a much lower price, and so they did. And then they turned the company around. So that was the opportunity for him to go from being an employee, a CEO, but still an employee, to being an owner of a large Swedish company. And this became the first important large investment that later enabled him to start his own investment company, Mellby Gård. Later he has bought companies like Academedia, Smartites, Kappahl, and others. So he was able to start his own investment career and his own investment company from seeing one large opportunity and taking advantage of that. by preparing, learning everything about this company by working there before. I hope this can be a reminder to continue to study and to learn and to read, because if we can be prepared for when the right opportunity presents itself, we know what to do with it, and that can have a big impact of our both financial life but our quality of life overall. Thank you so much for watching. See you next week.